It was 4 a.m. on July 26, 2025, when Asmita awoke, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The humid air of Lagunya Raghukanth village in Samastipur, Bihar, seemed to thicken with a dreadful silence, broken only by the sound of her own feigned gasp. Lying on the floor beside their bed, sprawled in a grotesque, unnatural position, was her husband, Sonu. A frayed electric wire lay conspicuously close to his lifeless hand, a chilling prop in the scene she had meticulously arranged. She instantly began to scream, a piercing theatrical sound that tore through the pre-dawn stillness, drawing neighbors and family to the horrific spectacle. She wept hysterically, telling everyone who rushed in that her husband, the auto rickshaw driver, had been tragically electrocuted, a sad accident that had stolen the life of a father of two. No one dared to question the grieving widow, but hidden in the background, a silent gray-haired man observed the scene with a chilling clarity that would soon unravel the entire bloody truth. That man was Tunja, Sonu's father, a man hardened by life but still sharp enough to recognize the difference between tragedy and treachery. As he peered into the bedroom, his eyes, unclouded by grief, catalogued the discrepancies. The tale of an accidental electrocution seemed clean, simple, and plausible. Yet the room spoke a language of violence. Blood was smeared across Sonu's pillow, splattered in dark crimson arcs against the nearby wall, and puddled on the floor. An ordinary electrical accident does not leave such a devastating canvas behind. But the most unsettling detail was the appearance of his son. Sonu's eyes were swollen, and his body bore marks that suggested not a sudden shock, but a prolonged, brutal assault. Tunja knew instantly, with a cold certainty, that his son had not died by electricity. He had been viciously murdered, and the elaborate setup of the electrical wire was nothing more than a desperate lie. A lie being frantically sold by the same woman who should have been guarding his life. To the outside world, the family unit of Sonu and Asmita had always appeared functional, if not entirely happy. They had married in 2017, and in the following years, Asmita had given birth to a daughter and a son, both bright young children who attended the local school. Sonu worked tirelessly, driving his auto rickshaw to support them in the humble confines of their village. But behind the closed doors of their home, a toxic pattern of domestic strife had become routine. Sonu had a severe, crippling addiction to alcohol, and the liquor transformed him from a working man into a violent brute. He would return late, drunk, and initiate arguments that invariably escalated into vicious beatings and verbal abuse. Asmita hoped that becoming a mother would change him, that the responsibility of children would compel him to abandon the bottle. But the addiction had a vice-like grip, tightening the noose around their marriage instead of loosening it. The marital discord was exacerbated by Sonu's refusal to change, driving Asmita further into a state of isolation and despair. Their disputes became so frequent and intense that Asmita often sought refuge at her parents' home, a desperate and temporary escape from the daily terror. The in-laws, hoping to salvage the relationship for the sake of the children, repeatedly organized local community council meetings, panchayats, to mediate the conflict. Following the council's counsel, Asmita would return home, but the cycles of abuse would inevitably resume. The air in the house was permanently charged with tension and resentment, creating a void in Asmita's emotional life, a void that she was slowly, almost unconsciously, looking to fill with kindness and attention from an outside source. The unexpected arrival of a young man named Hariam, a neighbor and acquaintance, introduced the spark that ignited the tragedy. Hariam was hired to tutor the children at home. This arrangement provided the perfect cover for clandestine meetings, as Sonu was typically away driving his auto rickshaw, and other family members were often preoccupied. Hariom was a young unmarried man, and his presence offered Asmita a stark contrast to her husband. He was attentive, respectful, and sober. The initial professional relationship soon blossomed into a sweet, supportive friendship. The emotional connection deepened quickly, transforming into a passionate, illicit affair that brought a forbidden joy into Asmita's otherwise miserable life. Hariom reciprocated the feelings, becoming completely besotted with the older married woman who confided in him about her suffering. As their connection grew stronger, Asmita started to emotionally detach from her husband. Seeing Hariom as her only source of true happiness and considering him the man she truly desired, she decided with a cold, determined resolve that she must find a way to make her relationship with Hariom permanent. The local community and Hariom's family were completely oblivious to the affair. They simply saw Hariom as a dutiful tutor visiting the Jah home to help the children. Sonu's unpredictable work schedule only served to deepen the secrecy, allowing Asmita to call Hariom on a whim for secret meetings whenever her husband was away, blurring the lines between a village home and a secret love nest. The intense, forbidden intimacy meant the two lovers were getting careless, basking in their secret world, forgetting that secrets in a tight-knit community are merely whispers waiting to be amplified into shouts. The whispers finally reached a crescendo, catching the attention of the neighborhood gossip mill. Soon enough, the tale of the Master Sahab, Hariom, and Asmita became the talk of the village. The couple's frequent, affectionate glances and intimate phone calls had not gone unnoticed by the watchful eyes of the community. In a small village, illicit love, whether in a town or city, is a cycle that eventually unravels in the public eye. Hariom was unmarried and Asmita was a married mother. The stark contrast only made their relationship more scandalous. It wasn't long before the rumors, fueled by jealousy and suspicion, finally landed like a punch to the gut for Sonu Jah. Sonu, already an intensely emotional man with a penchant for fury, erupted into a towering, uncontrollable rage the moment the truth of his wife's betrayal was confirmed. He rushed home, verbally abused Asmita and brutally assaulted her. The next day, when Hariom arrived to teach the children, he was met not with a warm welcome but with a torrent of insults and a furious demand to leave and never return. Sonu promptly terminated the children's tuition, forcing a painful and immediate separation between the two lovers. Their secret meeting stopped completely, leaving both Asmita and Hariom distraught and miserable in their enforced separation. Asmita knew her husband's temper. He was a monster when drunk, but once sober he would often become remorseful and shower her with affection to make amends for his violence. She understood this pattern of aggression and reconciliation perfectly, and she realized the only way to re-establish contact with Hariom was to play on Sonu's one redeeming quality: his love and ambition for his children. This initial violent breakup had only solidified Asmita's desperate need to eliminate the obstacle. But she was cunning. She would have to convince him to invite the devil back into his house, paving the way for a tragedy far greater than she had planned. The fire in the lovers' hearts refused to be extinguished by Sonu's violent prohibition. In fact, the forced separation had only intensified their feelings, driving them to distraction. Asmita, ever the strategist, recognized a weakness in her husband's armor: his ambition for his children's future. Sonu, despite his own destructive habits, was fiercely determined to ensure his children had a better life, far removed from the misery of his alcoholism. He toiled day and night, promising himself that he would educate them well and help them become successful. Asmita decided to weaponize this aspiration, preparing a cunning speech that would appeal to his ego and parental duty. One day, with a forced look of concern, Asmita approached her husband, carefully selecting her words to sow doubt and fear. "Look, dear," she began, playing the dutiful wife, The whole village is jealous of our happiness. They are the ones spreading these wicked lies about Master Sahab and me. I know the truth. There is nothing between us, but if we stop the children's tutoring now, they will fall behind in their studies. They will be ruined. We will have failed them, and all the village gossip will have won. The fear of his children's failure, coupled with his pre-existing resentment of the villagers' rumors, struck a chord in Sonu. His initial anger was now tempered by a genuine worry for his children. He had resolved to keep them away from the life of vice he had chosen, and Asmita's words resonated deeply with his commitment. Convinced by his wife's calculated reasoning and desperate to silence the village whispers by proving his trust, Sonu reluctantly agreed to allow Hariam back into the house to tutor the children. With this small victory, the forbidden romance was resurrected, albeit with a new, more dangerous layer of secrecy. Hariam resumed his visits, using the children's lessons as a perfect shield for his lingering presence. Behind the flimsy pretense of homework and academic guidance, the illegal meetings and clandestine activities resumed with a feverish intensity. Both lovers knew that the khichdi, the figurative messy affair, could not be sustained indefinitely. Sonu's routine of returning home late, in a drunken stupor, only served to fuel the violence, as he would initiate fights with Asmita over the smallest perceived slight. Their life had become a powder keg of abuse and betrayal, waiting for a single spark to detonate. The daily beatings continued, an unrelenting cycle of physical and emotional torment that chipped away at Asmita's sanity and fueled her resentment. Then came the day Hariam arrived for his teaching session and found a new barrier to overcome. Asmita, typically eager to be near him, kept her distance, busy with household chores. When she finally appeared, Hariam immediately noticed the subtle swelling on her cheek, a fresh, painful bruise she was attempting to conceal with her dupatta. Her avoidance and the physical mark of abuse instantly triggered an alarm in Hariam. He had only been gone for one night, and the sight of her injured face filled him with a restless fury. He pressed her for the truth, refusing to accept her clumsy lie about slipping and falling. The protective veil of her reserve finally broke under Hariam's persistent questioning, and Asmita burst into tears. "What can I tell you, Hariam?" she sobbed, recounting the familiar horrors of the night before. "This drunkard has made my life miserable. Every evening he comes home, abuses me, and beats me. How long can I bear this hell?" Her pain was genuine, but her display of anguish was also calculated, appealing directly to the deep, protective love Hariam felt for her. Hearing her sorrow ignited a consuming righteous rage in the young man, a hatred for Sonu that eclipsed his earlier fear. Though he knew this was a marital conflict into which he shouldn't intrude, the depth of his devotion to Asmita compelled him to comfort her. But the seed of murder had been irrevocably planted in his heart. Days later, Hariam returned to the Jah house only to find the little boy sick and sleeping. The house was quiet, and Asmita was alone and vulnerable. Seeing her lover, the dam of her suffering broke, and she began to weep uncontrollably. "Hariam, the situation is intolerable now," she pleaded, her voice choked with desperation. "Sonu raised his hand on me again last night for no reason. If you truly love me, you must help me out of this misery. Do something so I can escape his daily assaults. Otherwise, I swear I will be forced to poison myself and end my own life." The threat of suicide was a brilliant, manipulative masterstroke, a dramatic ultimatum designed to push Hariam past the point of no return. Hariam, horrified and distraught, instantly refuted her dark thoughts. "No, no, Bhabhi. You must never think like that. What would become of me if you took such a step? I cannot live a moment without you. I am prepared to do anything for you. Just give me the command." His declaration of love and loyalty escalated the stakes dramatically, placing the responsibility for a solution, any solution, squarely in his lap. As they embraced, a moment of profound, forbidden intimacy, Asmita confessed that the joy she found with him was the real happiness Sonu could never provide, cementing their bond in a shared desire for a life free of the victim. Hariom, after a brief reassurance, promised to devise a plan, leaving Asmita with a flicker of hope, a deadly hope that would soon seal Sonu's fate. The plan was hatched on the evening of July 25, 2025. Asmita called Hariom with news that sounded like a divine invitation. Sonu had left home with his auto rickshaw and would be gone until the late hours of the night. She urged Hariom to come immediately. He rushed to the house like a man possessed, driven by the intense anticipation of their secret rendezvous. Asmita's young son was already asleep and the house was quiet. A protective iron gate separated the main house from Sonu's father's small room, a gate that was usually locked, with one key held by Sonu and the other by Asmita. This night, in a calculated move, Asmita left the gate unlocked, creating a silent, unannounced pathway for Hariom to enter. Hariom slipped into the house like a ghost. Finding Asmita alone, he was immediately consumed by youthful passion. The atmosphere was charged with illicit desire. He was desperate to be with her, and Asmita in turn surrendered to his affections. Ready to enjoy the hours of freedom her husband's absence had provided. They were lost in their world of passion, completely oblivious to the cruel hand of fate that was about to turn their night of pleasure into a permanent nightmare. But fate is a cruel mistress. Suddenly, unexpectedly, Tunja had to return home. An urgent, unforeseen necessity had turned his auto rickshaw around halfway down the road. He quietly approached the house, perhaps not wanting to wake his sleeping father. He noticed the protective gate was unlocked, which was unusual, but dismissed it, attributing it to his wife's negligence. He entered his own home without a sound, his drunken senses dulling his awareness. He opened the door to his room, and what he saw, what he walked in on, was a sight he had never imagined. A brutal, undeniable confirmation of his darkest fears. The scene he stumbled upon in his own bedroom was the final fatal spark that would ignite a horrifying, violent explosion, an event that would leave only 2 survivors in the room and only one body. The sight that greeted Tunja, his wife, Asmita, intertwined with her young lover, Hariom, in his own bed, exploded the last vestiges of his control. The alcohol in his system did nothing to dampen his fury. It merely poured gasoline on the fire. He roared, his voice thick with a mixture of rage and wounded pride, transforming from a man into a force of brute violence. He lunged at Asmita, grabbing her by the hair, shouting vile accusations, dragging her across the floor and beating her relentlessly. The air was filled with his savage verbal assault, accusing her of infidelity and disrespect. Hariom, initially paralyzed by panic, instinctively wanted to flee, but seeing the brutal assault on the woman he loved galvanized him. He moved to intervene, trying to shield Asmita from her husband's monstrous attack. Sonu, now completely unhinged and seeing 2 people allied against him, turned his aggression toward Hariom. Recognizing the imminent threat to their secret and their lives, Hariom quickly slammed the bedroom door shut, locking it from the inside. This desperate act was an attempt to keep the chaos contained, to muffle the screams and the violence from reaching the ears of Sonu's father, who slept just a few feet away. Meanwhile, Sonu's rage reached its peak. He grabbed Asmita's hair again, slamming her against the floor. Consumed by a primitive, destructive jealousy, he became a violent beast, tearing at her clothes and attempting to force himself upon her in front of her lover. The terror of the moment, the savage realization that she was facing either utter humiliation or death, drove Asmita to an act of cold-blooded desperation. As Sonu climbed onto her, Asmita let out a piercing, guttural scream, a deliberate plea to her lover, a command that echoed the depth of her betrayal. "Hariom, what are you waiting for? Finish him. We won't get a better chance than this." Her words were the final trigger. Seeing Asmita under threat, Hariam's fear turned into murderous intent. He frantically searched the room for a weapon. His eyes fell upon a metal kettle resting nearby. Grabbing it, he lunged at Sonu from behind, smashing the heavy object repeatedly against the back of his head. The surprise attack staggered Sonu. He clutched his bleeding head and fell to the floor, stunned and disoriented. The moment Sonu fell, Asmita sprang to her feet, completely transformed from victim to accomplice. Her desperate plea had turned into a chilling directive for survival. She rushed to retrieve a lathi and a stick, common household implements in the village, and handed one to Hariam. Together, the two lovers began a brutal, merciless assault on the dazed and bleeding Sonu, raining blows down upon him until his body was a pulpy mess, barely clinging to life. When he lay motionless, barely conscious, Hariam took the electric wire, the very prop that would later be used to stage the accident, and wrapped it around Sonu's neck, squeezing the life out of him. Finally, to ensure that death looked like an accidental electrocution, Hariam deliberately applied a current to the deceased body. They had not only committed a murder, but had already devised a cover-up, confident they had outsmarted fate and the law. After the horrific act, Asmita, in a chilling display of composure, calmly changed her blood-spattered clothes. Under Hariam's pressure, they had one final perverse act of intimacy before Hariam slipped out of the house as quietly as he had arrived, leaving behind a dead body and a meticulously staged scene of an accident. The couple was momentarily relieved, convinced their secret was safe and the tragedy would be ruled a fatal accident. But they overlooked the piercing, silent evidence, the bloodied sheets, the wall splatters, and the telltale injuries on Sonu's body that spoke of a vicious beating, not a simple electric shock. The investigation began after Sonu's father, Tunja, alerted the authorities, insisting the scene spoke of murder. Police officers led by SAO Ajit Prasad Singh and later joined by ASP Sanjay Kumar quickly confirmed Tunja's suspicions. The victim's swollen eyes, the blood everywhere, and the brutal injuries, a broken hand, a deep cut near his eye, and severe head trauma, all pointed to a massive physical assault. The post-mortem report was the final nail in the coffin, confirming that Sonu had been brutally beaten before his death, strangled and then subjected to electricity to mask the crime.